The first time I noticed it, I thought it was accidental. Her door wasn't fully open, just not closed. Not wide enough to invite anyone in. Not shut enough to say stay out. Just sitting there, slightly ajar, like she'd stepped away for a second and forgot. I stood in the hallway longer than I should have, keys in my hand, staring at that thin slice of dim light cutting into the corridor. There was no sound coming from inside. No TV. No footsteps. Just the low hum of the building's old wiring and someone's distant cooking smell drifting up from downstairs. I almost knocked, but I didn't. I just went inside my own apartment and locked the door a little too quickly, like I'd done something wrong. It became a routine after that. Not officially, not something I admitted to myself, but I started noticing her door. Every evening, around the same time I came back from work, tired in that quiet, dull way, it would be there, slightly open, always just enough. Sometimes I'd slow down as I passed. Sometimes I wouldn't look at all, pretending I hadn't already checked from the stairs. We weren't strangers. That would have been easier. She was my friend's mom. I'd been to their house a few times years ago. Birthdays, random weekends, nothing important. Back then, she was just someone in the background, offering tea, asking polite questions, smiling in that way adults do when they're half listening. Now it was different. Now it was just her, alone in that apartment across the hall, and me, apparently paying attention. The first actual conversation happened over something stupid. I was unlocking my door when I heard her voice behind me. "You walk like you're trying not to exist." I turned too fast, almost dropped my keys. She was standing in her doorway, door open this time, properly open, leaning slightly against the frame. One hand wrapped around a mug, steam curling up slowly. What?" I said, a little louder than I meant to. She smiled, but not fully. "Your steps. They're careful." I shrugged, buying time. Old building. Feels like everything's listening. Maybe it is. There was a pause after that. Not awkward exactly. Just unfinished. My eyes flicked to her hands without thinking. The way her fingers rested around the mug. Relaxed. Like she wasn't trying to prove anything. I looked away first. "Long day?" she asked. "Yeah. Same as usual." She nodded, like that meant something specific. Another pause. I realized I was still standing outside my own door. "All right," I said, half laughing. "I should." "Yeah," she cut in gently. "You should." But she didn't move. Neither did I, for a second. Then I went inside. After that, the door stayed open more often. Not always. Just enough that it stopped feeling like coincidence. Sometimes I'd hear small things when I passed. The clink of a spoon against a cup, a chair shifting, once the low sound of music I couldn't quite recognize. I started taking longer to get my keys out. Slower steps. Small delays that didn't look like anything from the outside. Like I wasn't waiting for something. There were other habits too. I'd open my phone at night and scroll to messages I never sent. Names I didn't feel like explaining anymore. Conversations that ended without ending. Sometimes I'd type something, then erase it, then lock the screen and just sit there. It was quieter here than I expected. Quieter than it should have been. A week later, I came home later than usual. The hallway lights were dimmer at that hour, flickering slightly near the stairs. Her door was open again, a little wider this time. I slowed down without meaning to. As I passed, her voice came from inside. "Hey." Just that. I stopped, turned. She was standing a few steps in, not near the door like before. Like she hadn't been waiting at it, but also hadn't closed it. "You're late," she said. I leaned slightly against the wall, not stepping in. Not stepping away either. "Work," I said. "Got dragged." She nodded, like she'd expected that answer. There was something else in the room. Not loud, just present. A second mug on the table behind her. Still steaming. I noticed it before I could stop myself. My fingers tightened slightly around my keys. She followed my gaze. Then looked back at me. Didn't say anything. Just waited. And for some reason, that felt louder than if she had. I don't remember deciding to step forward. I just remember realizing I was already closer to her door than before. And thinking, this probably isn't about the door anymore. I didn't step all the way in. Not at first. I just crossed the threshold enough to feel like I had. "Sorry," I said, even though I didn't know what I was apologizing for. "Didn't mean to." "You didn't," she said, already turning back toward the table. I left it open. Like that explained everything. I closed the door behind me without thinking. Not fully, just enough that the hallway noise disappeared. The apartment smelled faintly like tea and something warm, maybe cinnamon. It wasn't strong. Just there, sitting quietly in the air. She moved like she wasn't aware of being watched. Picked up the second mug, then paused, like she was reconsidering something, before setting it back down. I make too much sometimes, she said. Habit. I nodded, even though she wasn't looking at me. Yes, same. That wasn't true. I barely made anything for myself. She gestured lightly toward the chair. You can sit. Or not. Up to you. I sat. Carefully. Like I might have to undo it. For a while, we didn't say much. The clock on her wall ticked louder than it should have. My eyes kept drifting to it, then back to my hands, then to the edge of the table. She slid the mug toward me without making a big deal out of it. Careful, she said. It's still hot. Our fingers didn't touch, but they got close enough that I noticed. Too close for something that was supposed to be nothing. I wrapped my hands around the mug anyway. The heat settled into my palms slower than I expected. You always come back around this time, she asked. Yeah, more or less. Routine's a dangerous thing. I glanced up. Why? She shrugged, a small movement. You start noticing what's missing. That sat between us for a second. I didn't answer right away. Just watched the steam rise from the cup, thinning out as it reached the air. I guess I already notice, I said, quieter than before. She looked at me then. Not surprised. Just attentive. What's missing? She asked. I almost laughed it off. Almost said something easy. But it came out different. Noise, I said. Not loud noise. Just someone being there. Without having to think about it. I shifted slightly in the chair, realizing I'd said more than I meant to. She didn't respond immediately. Just leaned back a little, arms folding loosely. Yeah, she said after a moment. That part's harder than people say. I hesitated. After everything, she said, cutting it off gently. There it was. Not explained. Not detailed. Just enough. Divorced. Alone. My friend's mom. It all sat in the same space now. And somehow, that made the room feel smaller. We talked a little more after that. Not about anything important. Just pieces. Work. The building. A neighbor downstairs who complained about footsteps, but walked louder than anyone. At one point, she smiled, properly this time, and I caught myself staring a second too long. I looked away first. Again. When I stood up to leave, it felt earlier than it actually was. Or maybe later. I wasn't sure. Thanks, I said, nodding toward the mug. You didn't even finish it. I know. She walked me to the door, but didn't open it. Just stood there, one hand resting lightly against the wood. You can come by, she said. You don't have to wait for the door thing. I let out a quiet breath. Yeah, okay. Neither of us moved. Then, as I reached for the handle, her fingers brushed mine. Not enough to stop me. Not enough to be accidental either. Just there. For a second too long. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because nothing really happened. Or maybe because it felt like something already had. After that night, the door stopped being a question. It was just open. Not every day, but enough that I started expecting it. And that was the first thing that felt off. A few evenings later, I didn't even pause outside anymore. I knocked once, lightly, and stepped in before she could answer. Hey, I said, already inside. She looked up from the kitchen counter, something half-cut in her hand. You're getting comfortable. Too much. There was a small pause. Maybe a little, she said, but she didn't sound like she meant it. I hovered near the table instead of sitting right away. My eyes moved around the room like it was new again, even though it wasn't. You cooking? I asked. Trying to, she said. Mostly just standing here thinking about it. I let out a quiet breath through my nose. Yeah, that counts. She smiled, but only on one side this time. I started coming by more often after that. Short visits. 10 minutes. 20. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we wouldn't. Once, we just sat there while something played softly on her phone, neither of us really listening. Another time, I fixed a loose cabinet hinge she'd been ignoring. You didn't have to do that, she said, watching me tighten the screw. I know. You just wanted to. I shrugged, still crouched down. Yeah. She didn't respond right away. When I looked up, she was already looking at me. I held it for a second, then looked back at the hinge. It should have stayed simple, but it didn't. A few days later, my phone buzzed while I was at work. It was my friend. Her son. Haven't heard from you in a while. You still in the city? I stared at the message longer than I should have. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Yeah, just busy. The 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then came back. You near my mom's place, right? My chest tightened slightly. Not enough to show. Just enough to notice. Yeah. Same building. Another pause. Oh, that's good. She hates being alone. I read that twice. Didn't reply. Just locked my phone and set it face down on the desk. That night, I didn't go over. Her door was open. Wider than usual. I still walked past it. Slower than usual. But I didn't stop. The next day, she knocked on my door. Not loud. Just enough. I opened it almost immediately. You didn't come by, she said. Not accusing. Just stating it. Yeah. I was busy, she finished, a faint nod. Right. There was a pause. She glanced past me into my apartment, like she'd never really seen it before. You don't have anything on your walls, she said. I followed her gaze. Never got around to it. Another pause. Then she stepped back slightly, like she was about to leave. Anyway, she said. Just checking. Checking what? She hesitated. Then shook her head. Nothing. She turned. And for some reason, that felt worse than if she'd said something. Hey, I said before I could stop myself. She paused, but didn't turn around fully. Just enough that I could see her profile. You can come in, I added. The words felt heavier than they should have. She stayed still for a second, then stepped inside. This time, the silence was different. Not easy, not neutral, just full. She walked in slowly, her eyes moving across the room, taking in the empty walls, the half-folded laundry on the chair, the phone on the table. You really don't stay anywhere long, do you? She said. I leaned against the counter. What makes you say that? She turned to look at me. You don't leave anything behind. That landed somewhere deeper than it should have. I'm here, aren't I? I said. Too quick. Too defensive. She noticed. Of course she did. I didn't mean, I know. I cut in softer now. A pause stretched between us. She stepped a little closer. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough that I could feel it. You didn't come yesterday, she said again, quieter this time. I thought maybe I should slow it down. Why? I looked at her. Really looked this time. Because I don't know what this is, I said. The words felt unfinished even as they left my mouth. She didn't answer right away. Just searched my face like she was trying to decide something. Then, you think I do, she said, barely above a whisper. Another step closer. Now there was almost no space between us. I could see the small lines near her eyes. The way her breathing shifted, just slightly. My hand moved before I thought about it. Stopped halfway. Hovered near her wrist. She didn't pull back. Didn't move forward either. Just stayed there. Waiting. Or maybe not. My voice came out quieter than I expected. If we don't stop, this gets complicated. Her eyes flicked down to my hand. Then back up. It already is, she said. Soft. Certain. For a second, everything narrowed. The room. The noise. The space between us. I leaned in, not fully. Not enough to mean it. But enough that it could have. And she didn't move. Not away. Not closer. Just stayed. Like she was letting me decide something I didn't understand yet. And that was the moment I realized. I wasn't the only one holding back. It changed after that. Not all at once. Just slightly off. The door wasn't always open anymore. Sometimes it was closed. Not locked. I checked once, without meaning to. Just closed enough to make me hesitate. And I did. I started waiting again. Listening before knocking. Leaving when I thought she might not be alone. It felt stupid. But it didn't stop. A few days later, I saw her outside for the first time. Not in the hallway. Not framed by a doorway. Just out. She was sitting on the low bench near the entrance of the building, a small paper bag beside her. The evening light was softer out there, catching in her hair in a way I hadn't noticed before. She looked up when I stepped out. You live here too, she said, like it was a joke she wasn't fully committing to. I let out a breath, still figuring that out. She smiled a little, then gestured toward the bench. Sit. I brought too much again. I sat. Not too close. Not far enough. She handed me something from the bag. A small pastry, still warm. Careful, she said. Same warning as before. I nodded. You say that like I don't learn. Do you? I didn't answer. We ate in silence for a bit. People passed by occasionally. A couple arguing quietly. Someone on the phone, pacing. The world moving around us like we weren't part of it. It felt exposed. Different from her apartment. Here, there was nowhere to hide inside the moment. You didn't come by, she said again, out of nowhere. Not accusing. Just returning to it. I know. You keep saying that like it explains something. I rubbed my thumb against the edge of the paper bag, folding it slightly, then flattening it again. I don't want to mess this up, I said. She glanced at me. This. I exhaled through my nose. Whatever this is. There was a pause. Longer this time. She leaned back slightly, her gaze drifting ahead instead of at me. You think you're the only one who can mess it up, she said. I looked at her. She didn't look back. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. Her voice was calm. Too calm. That's the problem. Something tightened in my chest. Not sharp. Just steady. I talked to him. I said before I could stop myself. That got her attention. Your son, I added, quieter now. Her expression didn't change much. Just a slight shift in her eyes. What about him? He texted. Asked if I was still around. And I said yes. She nodded once. Okay. That's it. What do you want me to say? She asked, finally turning to face me. I don't know, I admitted. And that was the truth. The air between us felt thinner now, like something had been named without being said directly. She looked down at her hands, resting loosely in her lap. You should probably stop coming over, she said. Just like that. No build-up. No hesitation. I stared at her. You don't mean that. A small exhale left her lips. Not quite a laugh. You don't get to decide that. I'm not. You are, she cut in, still calm. Every time you come in like it's nothing. Like it doesn't lead anywhere. Her fingers curled slightly, then relaxed again. You think I don't notice, she added, softer now. I didn't respond. Didn't know how. She looked back at me then. Fully this time. No distance. No deflection. Just there. I'm not confused, she said. The words landed heavier than anything else she'd said before. I know exactly what this feels like. A pause. And that's why it's a problem. My throat felt dry. I shifted slightly closer without realizing it. Then why keep the door open? I asked. Her breath caught. Just for a second. There it was. Something unguarded. Something real. She held my gaze longer this time. Too long. I thought maybe she started. Then stopped. Looked away. Then back again. Maybe you'd stop at some point. I swallowed. I didn't. I know. The space between us felt smaller now. Not physically, but enough. My hand rested on the bench, closer to hers than before. Not touching. Just there. She noticed. Of course she did. Her fingers shifted slightly. Not away. Just enough to acknowledge it. My voice came out lower. If I don't stop. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. Steady. Tired. Honest in a way that didn't leave room for pretending. Then what are you asking me to do? She said. The question stayed there. Between us. Not loud. Not urgent. But impossible to ignore. And for a second, I didn't know if I was about to answer it or cross it. After that night on the bench, everything went quiet. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that makes you notice how loud your own thoughts are. Her door stayed closed. Not slightly open. Not half inviting. Just closed. I told myself it didn't mean anything. People close doors. That's normal. Still, every time I walked past it, I slowed down a little. Not enough to stop. Just enough to hear if there was anything on the other side. There never was. Or maybe there was, and I just wasn't meant to hear it anymore. I stopped going by. Not deliberately. Not in some dramatic, final way. I just didn't. I came home later. Took longer routes. Stayed out even when I didn't have a reason to. One night, I stood outside the building for almost 10 minutes, staring at my phone like I was waiting for something to appear on it. Nothing did. I opened our chat once. Scrolled up. There wasn't much there. A few short messages. Practical things. Nothing that matched what had been happening in person. I typed something anyway. You okay? I stared at it. Then deleted it. Locked the screen. Put the phone back in my pocket like it hadn't mattered. A few days later, I saw her again. By accident. I was coming up the stairs when I heard voices from the hallway. Hers and someone else's. I slowed down without thinking. Not enough to hide. Just enough to listen. You don't have to stay if it's inconvenient, she was saying. It's not, a man's voice replied. I told you, I can manage a few days. My chest tightened. I stepped into the hallway. She saw me first. The shift in her expression was small. Quick. Almost nothing. But I caught it. Hey, I said, like I hadn't heard anything. Hi, she replied. There was a suitcase near her door. Not hers. The man standing beside it looked older than me. Not by much. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tired eyes. Familiar posture. He glanced at me, then back at her. You didn't mention neighbors, he said. She hesitated for half a second. Then, he's my son's friend. The word friend landed heavier than it should have. I nodded once. Yeah, that was enough. Or at least, it was supposed to be. I'm staying here for a bit, the guy added, extending a hand I didn't take right away. Just until things settle. I shook it anyway. Right, I said. Makes sense. I didn't ask what things. Didn't want the answer. That night, the walls felt thinner. I could hear movement from her apartment. Footsteps. A chair scraping. A low murmur of voices that didn't carry words. I sat on my bed, phone in my hand again. Opened the chat. Closed it. Opened it again. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then dropped. The next evening, her door opened. For the first time in days. I noticed it immediately. Of course I did. But this time, it wasn't quiet inside. There was laughter. Not hers alone. I stood there for a second too long. Then kept walking. Later that night, I stepped out to throw something away. The hallway was empty again. Her door, slightly open. Just like before. Like nothing had changed. I stopped. Turned. Took a step toward it. Then another. My hand lifted slightly. Not to knock. Just to exist there. I could see the edge of the table from where I stood. The same one. The same place. But the second mug wasn't there anymore. Just one. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for it to feel intentional. Long enough for it to feel like a decision. My hand dropped back to my side. I took a step back. Then another. And walked inside my own apartment without touching the door. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened a week later. Not planned. Not built up. Just a knock. I was halfway through making something I wasn't going to finish eating when I heard it. Soft. Familiar. I stood there for a second, knife still in my hand, like I needed to be sure it was real. Then I set it down and opened the door. She was there. Alone. No suitcase. No second voice behind her. Just her, standing the same way she always did. One hand lightly resting against the doorframe, like she didn't fully commit to being anywhere. Hey, she said. Hey. A pause. You busy? I glanced back at the counter. Not really. She nodded once. Okay. Didn't move. Didn't leave either. I stepped aside. She came in. The apartment felt smaller with her in it. Or maybe just clearer. She looked around again, like she had before. The same empty walls. The same unfinished corners. You still haven't put anything up, she said. Didn't feel necessary. She walked a little further in, then stopped near the table. You've been avoiding me, she added, not turning around. I leaned against the counter, arms folding loosely. I thought that's what you wanted. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. She exhaled quietly. That's not fair. I nodded slightly. Probably not. Silence stretched between us again. But this time, it didn't feel uncertain. Just heavy. She turned then, slowly. He left, she said. I frowned slightly. The guy. She nodded. A few days ago. I didn't ask why. Didn't need to. She watched me like she was waiting for something. A reaction. A question. Anything. I didn't give her one right away. Instead, I looked down at the counter, tracing a faint line in the surface with my finger. I didn't know what that was, I said after a moment. What? That week. I glanced up briefly, seeing him there. Hearing you not alone. Her expression shifted, just slightly. It wasn't like that. I know, I said. And I did. That wasn't the part that stayed with me. I stopped, searching for the right version of it. It made things clear. Clear how? I hesitated. then let it out, quieter than I expected. That I don't get to stand here and pretend this is nothing. She didn't move, didn't interrupt, just listened. I pushed off the counter, taking a step closer. Not too close. Enough. I tried to stop, I added. Thought it'd fix it. Did it? I shook my head once. No. A small breath left her lips. Yeah, she said. Same. The room felt still, like everything had already been decided somewhere else, and we were just catching up to it. I don't want to make this worse for you, I said. She tilted her head slightly. You think it's just worse? I think I paused. I think it's not simple. That's not the same thing. No, I admitted. It's not. Another step. Closer now. Not accidental anymore. If we keep doing this, I said, my voice lower, it doesn't stay quiet. I know. And if it doesn't stay quiet, her eyes held mine. Steady. You think I haven't thought about that? She asked. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she did something small. Reached out. Not all the way. Just enough for her fingers to touch my wrist. Light. Careful. Like she could still take it back. But she didn't. I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it, she said. No drama. No emphasis. Just said. It landed heavier than anything else. My hand shifted slightly under hers. Not pulling away. Not holding on either. Just meeting it. I don't know what happens after this, I said. Neither do I. That's the problem. She shook her head, faintly. No, she said. That's the honest part. The distance between us closed without either of us deciding it. No sudden movement. No rush. Just less space. I could feel her breath now. The slight shift in it. The way it matched mine for a second, then didn't. We stopped there. Right before it could turn into something else. Right before it had to. She looked at me. Really looked. Then gave the smallest nod. Okay, she said. Soft. Not an answer. Not a promise. Just something we both understood. It didn't change overnight. Nothing about it did. The next morning, I still woke up at the same time. Still stood in the kitchen a little too long, staring at the same empty counter before making coffee I didn't really want. The hallway still sounded the same. Pipes humming. Someone dragging something across the floor upstairs. And her door, closed. I noticed it. Of course I did. But this time, I didn't stop. We didn't fall into each other. That would have been easier. Instead, things shifted in smaller ways. Quieter ones. A few days passed before I saw her again. Not inside. Not behind a door. On the bench. The same one. She was already sitting there when I came out. A cup in her hand. Looking like she hadn't been waiting, but hadn't been surprised either. Hey, I said. Hey. I sat down beside her. Not as careful this time. Still aware. But not pretending I wasn't. She held out the second cup without looking at me. Careful. I almost smiled. Still hot. Always. Our fingers brushed this time. Neither of us moved away. We didn't talk about that night. Not directly. Instead, we talked around it. Work. The building. Someone new moving into the third floor who already complained too much. But it felt different. Less like avoiding. More like allowing. Sometimes, I'd still come home late. Sometimes, her door would still be closed. But now, there were other rhythms. A knock, every now and then. Not constant. Not expected. Just enough. And when it came, it didn't feel like crossing a line anymore. It felt like being let in. One evening, I found myself inside her apartment again. Same table. Same quiet. But the space felt lived in now. Not just hers. Not just mine either. She handed me a mug without saying anything. I took it. Didn't hesitate. You're getting used to this, she said, watching me. Yeah. A pause. Is that bad? She shook her head slightly. No. Then, after a second, just different. There were still moments. Ones where we'd both go quiet at the same time. Where something almost came up, then didn't. Where the weight of it all sat just beneath the surface. But it didn't feel like something to escape anymore. Just something to carry. Together. Weeks later, I ran into her in the hallway early in the morning. Earlier than usual. She looked surprised. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. We stood there for a second, neither moving. Then she stepped back slightly, opening her door. Not wide. Just enough. I glanced at it. Then at her. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Inside, the light felt softer. Quieter. like it had settled into something. She moved toward the kitchen. I leaned against the counter like I always did. "You want tea or coffee?" she asked. "Whatever you're having." "Tea." "Then tea." She nodded, like that made sense. While she poured, I found myself watching her hands again. Same as before, but it didn't feel like noticing something I shouldn't. It just felt familiar. When she handed me the cup, our fingers touched again. Stayed a second longer this time. Not accidental. Not questioned. Just there. We stood like that for a moment. Close. Quiet. No rush to fill it. No need to define it. I don't think anything became easier. Not really. But it became clearer. Less about what it was. More about choosing it anyway. Later, as I stepped back into the hallway, I didn't look at the door behind me. Didn't need to check if it stayed open. I already knew. And for the first time in a while, going back to my own place didn't feel like leaving something behind. It just felt like part of it. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?